Miss Sterling, due to your long-term exposure to radioactive elements in the lab, you have malignant cell proliferation. I'm afraid it's terminal cancer. Pearl Sterling froze for a moment, then asked with a bitter smile, Doctor, how long do I have? A month at most. The attending physician paused for a few seconds. Cherish this last bit of time, Pearl nodded. Okay, I understand. With that, she picked up her medical file and walked out the door. As she made her way downstairs, she replayed the recent events in her mind. Suddenly, a cool voice stopped her. Pearl Sterling, what are you doing at the hospital? She looked up to see a man in a white coat standing at the end of the hallway. It was Ethan Cole, her husband. She had forgotten, the hospital where she'd come for her checkup was the very same base hospital where Ethan worked. Not that he would care anyway. After all, he had never loved her. At that thought, a self-deprecating glint appeared in her eyes. I have a cold, just came to get some medicine. A cold? Ethan frowned, looking at her deathly pale face. Let me see your chart. He held out his hand, long and slender, like a finely sculpted work of art. The sight made Pearl's heart skip a beat. After a moment, she shook her head faintly. There's no need. Your time is valuable. You should get back to work. It was the first time in their many years of marriage that Pearl had ever refused him. Ethan's eyes darkened. I don't want to repeat myself. The chart. Pearl fell silent. She didn't want to tell him about her illness. At least, not now. The atmosphere between them grew tense. Just as Ethan was about to take the chart and see for himself, he caught a glimpse of a familiar figure at the far end of the corridor. He hesitated for only a second before lowering his gaze. Since it's nothing serious, you should head home. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he turned and walked away. Soon after, two voices drifted into her ears. First, a woman's questioning tone. Ethan, who were you just talking to? Just a friend. We chatted for a bit. Ethan's deep voice was laced with an unprecedented gentleness. A friend? Pearl's hand, clutching the medical file, tightened abruptly, but she quickly composed herself and continued toward the exit. She and Ethan had a secret marriage. Besides their parents, no one knew. After all, this relationship had been her one-sided wish from the very beginning. She and Ethan had met 5 years ago during a rural outreach program. He was the cool, handsome team leader, and for her, it was love at first sight. Later, she had tried everything she could think of to pursue him, but he always kept her at a distance. Ethan was like the distant moon, never meant to pause for anyone. But what Pearl had never expected was that one day, that moonlight would actually shine on her. That night, he had been blind drunk. He pressed her down beneath him, whispering hoarsely in her ear. Julie, don't go. She had willingly sunk into that moment. After a night of passion, Ethan married her, but he proposed keeping the marriage a secret, claiming it would be better for his career. There wasn't even a wedding. Immersed in happiness, she had agreed without a second thought. It wasn't until after they were married and had moved back to the city that she accidentally learned the truth. The person he had been calling for that night wasn't her. It was the woman from the hallway just now, Juliet Quinn, his first love, the one that got away. The night he got drunk was the day she had been sent abroad on a work assignment. Juliet. He'd called her Julie, but the name was meant for Juliet. The similarity in sound had sealed the fate of 3 people, but it didn't matter anymore. Now that Juliet was back and she was dying, everything could finally return to its rightful place. A mocking smile touched Pearl's lips as she left without a backward glance. Just as she reached the ground floor, the phone in a nearby booth rang for her. Miss Sterling, the watch and fountain pen you special ordered 6 months ago have arrived. Would you like us to deliver them to your home? The formal voice made Pearl pause. She then remembered it was the sales associate from the Montblanc counter at the department store. The items were always in high demand, so she'd had to order Ethan's birthday present half a year in advance. No, that won't be necessary. Pearl forced a smile. Please just get rid of them for me. Throw them away, I don't care. I don't want them anymore. Not just the pen and the watch, she didn't want Ethan anymore either. What don't you want anymore? Pearl spun around to see Ethan standing behind her, one eyebrow raised in question. Pearl instinctively hung up the phone and offered a vague excuse. Some shoes I bought before. They pinch a little. Is that so? Ethan didn't seem suspicious. He nodded and said casually, if something doesn't fit, cutting your losses is a good thing. Just like an unhappy marriage. Pearl desperately wanted to ask him. Now that Juliet Quinn was back, why hadn't he left? But before she could find the words, Ethan had already entered their apartment building, and she had to swallow her questions once more. That night, the small lamp in the bedroom cast a faint glow. Pearl and Ethan lay in the same bed, yet a universe seemed to separate them. Just then, an arm wrapped around her waist. A warm body pressed against her from behind. The man's soft kisses trailed down the nape of her neck and her ear, his hands expertly moving lower. In the hazy, intimate atmosphere, his voice was laced with a captivating allure. "Julie!" Pearl went rigid. The man, seemingly unaware, buried his face in her neck, his hot breath making her tense up as he nibbled at her skin. "Pearl Sterling?" Ethan finally sensed something was wrong. He propped himself up and squinted at her. The cancer in her stomach had already spread, and Pearl was long accustomed to the pain, but at this moment, she couldn't stop her eyes from turning red. She had never noticed it before, but Ethan always called her by her full name. Only when they were intimate did he call her Julie. She wanted to ask him who was the person he was really thinking of. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye, but she didn't wipe it away. Ethan's brow furrowed. In 5 years of marriage, he had never seen this side of Pearl. Comforting people wasn't his strong suit. After a long moment, he reached out to wipe her tear away. But Pearl turned her head, avoiding his touch. His fingers met empty air, and Ethan froze. For no reason at all, a sharp pain pierced his heart. He said in a low voice, "Did something happen? No matter what it is, I'll be here with you." "Really?" Pearl regained her composure, her eyes dark and shining. Ethan's throat felt tight. He was about to answer. Clack, the night lamp went out, plunging the room into total darkness. Soon, the scattered chatter of neighbors drifted in from outside the window. "Oh, what happened? The power's out." "Don't even ask. The new grid is unstable. Even the inpatient wards at the hospital lost power." The next second, Pearl heard a rustling in the room. It was Ethan, getting out of bed and dressing quickly. His movements were swift, his voice urgent. "I have to get back to the hospital." But he wasn't on call tonight. And just moments ago, he had said he would always be with her. Pearl instinctively reached out in his direction. "Ethan," she caught the corner of his shirt, her fingertips aching from the force of her grip. In the next instant, Ethan yanked his shirt away without hesitation, his cold rebuke striking her. "Pearl Sterling, can you stop making a scene? If something goes wrong, can you take responsibility for it?" Pearl tilted her head up. She remembered now. Juliet Quinn was on duty tonight, and she was afraid of the dark. A self-mocking look flickered in her eyes. "I was just going to say, be careful on your way." That sentence finally made Ethan pause. He looked at Pearl's calm face, his thoughts in turmoil. But after only a second, he made his decision. With the sound of the door closing, silence returned to the bedroom. Pearl blinked slowly. If Ethan were thinking clearly, he would have remembered that she had night blindness. But right now, his mind was completely filled with Juliet Quinn. Pearl calmly averted her gaze. This time, she would walk through the night alone, whether she could see clearly or not. Suddenly, a wave of nausea churned in her stomach. Pearl stumbled toward the bathroom. She bumped into something. Crash, it fell to the floor with a sharp, shattering sound. She instinctively reached down to pick it up, but accidentally pressed her hand onto the splintered glass. The pain sent a fresh wave of nausea through her, and she could only open her mouth and heave violently. The next day, Pearl was woken by the sound of the front door opening. She struggled up from the floor, realizing she had fallen asleep in the bathroom last night. Her disheveled state drew a sideways glance from Ethan. When he saw the mess in the living room, a pang of guilt struck him. "You go rest. I'll clean this up." Ethan picked up a broom and went to clear the debris. But as he got closer and saw what had broken, he froze. How did our wedding photo get smashed? They had never had a wedding ceremony, and for all these years, their marriage had been a secret. They were rarely even seen together. The wedding photo was the only picture they had of the two of them. Pearl, now washed up, glanced at him, her tone calm. "I knocked it over by accident last night." She sounded so casual, as if it were just some unimportant decoration. But she hadn't been like that before. She'd saved up for a month to get the voucher for that photo. She'd even had it specially laminated and cherished it so much that it rarely gathered a speck of dust. Ethan tried to pick up the photo, but Pearl simply swept the picture, along with the broken glass, into the trash can. At the same time, Ethan grabbed her wrist. His brow furrowed slightly. Did this happen last night? Only then did Pearl notice the long, winding cut on her finger. It was about 1.5 inches long and looked frightening. Ethan brought out the first aid kit, settled her on the sofa, and began to treat her wound. His eyes were downcast as he disinfected, applied ointment, and bandaged the cut, each step performed with meticulous care. In between, he tried to console her. "It's just a photo. We can just take a new one." Anyone watching would have thought him a gentle and considerate husband if they ignored the lipstick stain on his collar. An image of Juliet Quinn flashed through Pearl's mind. Even from that fleeting glimpse in the hospital, she somehow remembered the shade of her lipstick. A bold, bright red, identical to the one on Ethan's shirt. Pearl pursed her lips. Surprisingly, she didn't feel that sad. She just looked away and murmured a soft, "okay." He would forget about it soon enough anyway. There was no point in arguing. After tending to her, Ethan went downstairs to use the phone booth. It was lunchtime, and the streets were eerily quiet. From the second floor, Pearl could vaguely hear him say words like "afternoon" and "I'll go with you." She guessed it had something to do with Juliet. Sure enough, Ethan didn't come back up. But his absence worked in her favor. It was time for her to prepare for her departure. First, she went to the Research Institute and resigned from her job. Next, she went to a law firm. The lawyer placed a pre-drafted divorce agreement on the table. "Miss Sterling, if it's inconvenient for both of you to go to the registrar's office, you can have your spouse sign this agreement. It has the same legal effect." Pearl nodded. "Okay. I also need to draw up a will." "What?" The lawyer was taken aback. It was rare for someone so young to be writing a will. "I have terminal stomach cancer," Pearl said with a small smile. "After I die, please donate my body to the Research Institute." In life, she had stood in the way of someone else's happiness. In death, she didn't want to be a burden to them either. Pearl left under the lawyer's sympathetic and admiring gaze. The moment she stepped outside, she ran into the last person she wanted to see. Ethan was walking toward the law firm with Juliet Quinn, gently wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. They were lost in their own world, looking like a deeply devoted couple. The moment he saw Pearl, Ethan was visibly flustered. He instinctively let go of Juliet, but his expression quickly darkened. "Pearl Sterling, were you listening to my phone call?" Pearl's hand tightened. She knew Ethan didn't love her, but she never knew he thought she was so despicable. Pearl pressed her lips together and said coolly, "You're overthinking it. I was just here on some business of my own." Ethan was clearly unconvinced. "What business could you possibly have here?" "I already told you," and before he could finish, the lawyer came downstairs. "Miss Sterling, you forgot your divorce documents." Seeing that Pearl hadn't left, he breathed a sigh of relief and handed her the folder. Then he turned to Juliet and Ethan. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole, you're just in time. I'll take you up." But the group just stood there, unmoving. The atmosphere was awkward. As the lawyer looked on, confused, Pearl let out a sardonic laugh. So they were already eager to live as husband and wife. Ethan frowned but offered no explanation. His attention was now entirely on something else. He looked at Pearl, his face dark. "You want a divorce?" This time, Pearl answered before the lawyer could, her expression serene. "I'm asking for a friend." She refused to declare her defeat in front of the victor. But the calmer she appeared, the more suspicious Ethan became. He couldn't help but press, "Which friend?" Just then, a hand reached out from the side and linked through his arm. "Ethan, is this your friend? If you two have something to discuss, you can go ahead. I can handle the consultation myself." Ethan snapped back to reality, staring blankly for a moment. "No, it's fine. Your matter is more important." To his surprise, Pearl's expression remained placid. There was none of the anger or sadness he had expected, not even a hint of disappointment in her eyes. Instead, she was unnervingly calm and composed. "Mr. Cole, I won't disturb you any longer. Goodbye." A flash of mockery crossed Pearl's eyes before she turned and left without a backward glance. Mr. Cole. It was the first time Pearl had ever called him that, a title dripping with distance. Ethan's heart pounded with a strange panic. He instinctively wanted to go after her, but when he met Juliet's tear-filled gaze, he stayed put. It was the lawyer who muttered, "You know Miss Sterling. Such a pity about her. It seems she's contracted some kind of illness. What did you say?" Ethan's entire body went rigid, as if struck by lightning. Say that again, the lawyer, momentarily stunned, quickly recovered. My apologies, that's Miss Sterling's private information. What illness does she have? Ethan's eyes narrowed dangerously. His forceful demeanor grew more intimidating, and a thin layer of sweat broke out on the lawyer's forehead. I think it's probably just a cold. Just then, Juliet Quinn chimed in. I remember seeing her at the hospital last time. She was coming down from the second floor. She hid her true feelings, blinking innocently. At her words, Ethan's brow furrowed, his expression turning cold and grave. It was the transition from summer to fall, the peak of flu season. The hospital had set up the entire second floor as the infectious disease ward to handle the influx of patients. He had indeed run into Pearl on the second floor last time. Could it be that he was just overthinking things? Recalling Pearl's pale face, Ethan's brow tightened. After a long pause, he finally spoke, meeting Juliet's expectant gaze. You're probably right, let's go. I'll accompany you to your consultation. Meanwhile, Pearl was completely unaware of all this. When she got home, she drew a large red circle around the 19th on her calendar. It was the countdown to her departure. 1 week left. She had to get Ethan to sign the divorce papers, and then she would leave to live out the rest of her days. In the little time she had left, she wanted nothing more to do with him, and she certainly didn't want to be a stand-in for another woman. Pearl pushed aside her grief, a sense of release and weariness pulling at the corners of her lips. Suddenly, 2 arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her into an embrace. Were you angry today? The man's warm lips brushed against her earlobe. Quinn is a friend of mine who just returned to the country. Her family passed away, and there were some inheritance issues, so I went with her for a consultation. Hearing him call her Quinn, Pearl found it laughable. Outside, they were Mr. and Mrs. Cole, but at home, they had to be discreet. She gave a cold smirk, her tone distant. That must have been hard for you. With that, Pearl tried to push him away. All she wanted now was to get this over with and cut all ties with him. Don't move. As if sensing her restlessness, Ethan held her tighter, his voice low and husky. I have another surprise for you. As he spoke, a silver necklace glittered under the light. Ethan smiled. Do you like it? It's something all you girls seem to like. I saw someone else wearing one, so I bought one for you too. Pearl stared at Ethan. Even though he seemed so casual about it, her nose tingled and her eyes unexpectedly welled up. When Ethan said he saw someone else with one, she knew. It was Juliet Quinn, except Juliet's was the real thing and hers was a cheap knockoff. He didn't even notice the sharp, pointed edge of the pendant, which had been roughly filed down. When it came to her, he never paid attention. Moved already? Seeing her reaction, Ethan didn't wait for Pearl to refuse. He gently pushed her hair aside and fastened the necklace around her neck. As he moved, the sharp point of the pendant scraped from her collarbone to her ear, leaving a long, red mark. A drop of blood trickled down her skin. Ethan smiled as he stepped in front of her. I saw how nice it looked on Quinn, so I specifically asked her to pick one out for. His words died in his throat when he saw the cut on Pearl's neck. You. His gaze followed the wound down to the sharp necklace. Ethan looked at Pearl, who seemed to feel no pain. His heart suddenly clenched. He wanted to ask if it hurt, but what came out was, Juliet must have been tricked. But the sharpness of that point was clearly intentional, filed down by someone on purpose. But some people are blind of heart, and thus blind of sight. The irony was that she was the one who had been hurt from the beginning, yet he never once asked if she was in pain. His only concern was that she might misunderstand Juliet. Pearl lowered her gaze slightly, then gave a faint "Mhem." Can I take it off now? Seeing her indifferent expression, so devoid of emotion, Ethan felt a strange panic rise in his chest. Before he could move, Pearl took the necklace off herself. She placed it in Ethan's hand. Then she turned, went to the mirror, and gently applied ointment to the cut. Perhaps out of guilt, Ethan came over after a moment and gently wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. It was an intimacy he had never shared with her before. I managed to get a voucher for the photo studio. We'll go take a wedding photo tomorrow. Pearl's back went ramrod straight. Was this compensation? But was there any point? She was silent for a moment, then nodded and said softly, whatever you want. After the photo was taken, it would be time for them to say goodbye. Once, a wedding photo had been her obsession. Now, to end things with one, perhaps it was fate. Seeing her lack of concern, an inexplicable sense of dread grew in Ethan's heart. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but he felt she was different from before. It was as if she didn't smile at him anymore. 6 days before her departure, Ethan had an emergency surgery. The photo shoot was postponed. 5 days before, Ethan had a report meeting. The photo shoot was postponed again. 4 days before, Ethan covered a shift for the chief physician. The photo shoot was postponed yet again. 3 days before her departure, Pearl put on a seafoam green polka dot dress, curled her hair into fashionable ringlets, wore the pearl earrings she had never dared to wear before, and applied a vibrant red lipstick. She decided not to wait for Ethan anymore. She could take the photo by herself. It would be both her divorce portrait and her funeral portrait. She wanted to leave behind her most beautiful self. As she thought this, a light smile graced her lips. She didn't expect to see a handsome figure suddenly appear in the mirror. Pearl turned her head. Ethan was leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, his eyes half closed. "Why aren't you wearing the necklace I gave you? It doesn't go with this outfit." Pearl stood up, smoothing her dress, and gave a casual excuse. Fortunately, Ethan didn't press the matter, only nodding. "Then after the photos, we'll go buy a new outfit to match the necklace." By the time they arrived at the photo studio, a long line had already formed. Pearl and Ethan had to stand at the end. Before long, a cold sweat broke out on Pearl's forehead, and a dull ache spread through her organs. Ethan, however, was too preoccupied to notice. His pager had been beeping nonstop for the last few minutes. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing imperceptibly. Pearl said calmly, "If you have something to do, you should go." She had never expected him to show up in the first place. "It's nothing, don't worry about it." Ethan shook his head, only then noticing the fine beads of sweat on Pearl's forehead. He handed her a handkerchief. "It's hot. Wipe your face." Pearl looked down. Last time, Ethan had used this same handkerchief to wipe away Juliet Quinn's tears. So, could the same thing really be shared between two people? But she didn't want it. Just as Pearl was about to speak, an employee from the studio approached them. "Sir, we have men's suits available in the shop. Would you like to change?" Pearl followed his gaze. Ethan was still wearing the clothes from his shift, not only wrinkled but also stained with blood. "No, thank you," Ethan refused without hesitation. She remembered reading in Ethan's diary that when he took his high school graduation photo, he had specially bought a suit and used pomade just to stand next to Juliet Quinn. He had been so particular. Pearl smiled sardonically. Out of the corner of her eye, his pager continued to flash. She could feel his agitation, so she turned to the employee. "I'm here today to have a memorial portrait taken. Could the photographer please hurry?" "I'm so sorry, right away." The employee reacted almost instantly and rushed off. Ethan, however, his dark eyes fixed on her face, said sharply, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Pearl didn't turn around, only glancing at him from the side, looking cool and aloof. "You're in a hurry, aren't you?" "No, I'm not. All my time today is for you." Ethan denied it instinctively, but a sudden unease gripped him. The Pearl of late was a complete stranger. Before he could dwell on it, the employee returned to lead them in for the photo. But just then, a commotion erupted on the street. People were murmuring, "Did you hear? A doctor at the hospital has been taken hostage by a patient. I think it's a female doctor, a Dr. Quinn, who just came back from studying abroad." When she turned back, the space beside her was empty. Ethan was gone. The studio employee looked at Pearl's expression and asked cautiously, "Ma'am, will you still be taking the photo by yourself?" She had never expected Ethan to come, and now that he'd left. In the end, it was all the same. Pearl hid the mockery in her eyes, her voice gentle yet firm. "Yes." Flash with a puff of white smoke, the image was captured. She was smiling faintly, her gaze clear and gentle, yet tinged with a hint of determination and freedom. Back home, she looked at the photograph again and again. She had originally planned to have the Institute burn this memorial portrait along with her other belongings after her death, but now she felt a little reluctant to part with it. She opened the drawer of her nightstand to put it away and, while she was at it, took out the divorce agreement and headed to the hospital. Time was running out. It was time to tie up loose ends. At the hospital, everything was proceeding in an orderly fashion. Ethan was in his office. When he saw Pearl walk in, his brow furrowed. "What are you doing here?" He had never liked Pearl showing up at his workplace. "Pearl Sterling, you've been so thoughtless lately. Juliet was taken hostage. Is a human life not as important as your wedding photo? You've really disappointed me." Pearl hadn't said a single word, yet the accusations rained down on her. The man's eyes were cold and filled with disgust, but she only found it laughable. A fleeting sneer crossed her face before she said calmly, "You've misunderstood. I came to see you about something." Ethan, however, said indifferently, "I'm very busy." As if she hadn't heard him, Pearl took out the document, flipped to the last page, and placed it in front of him. Her movements were fluid, her voice unruffled. "I won't disturb you, just sign this and I'll leave immediately." "We can talk about whatever it is at home," Ethan said, his tone filled with impatience. Pearl remained unmoved. "I just need a signature." Ethan's expression turned ugly. The old Pearl had been as gentle as water, completely obedient to him. This was the first time she had been so forceful. The atmosphere grew tense. A sudden, baseless anxiety gripped his heart. Just as he was about to flip the document to the front page, a cry of alarm echoed from the hallway. "Dr. Quinn, watch out!" In an instant, Ethan's expression changed dramatically. Without looking, he flipped back to the last page, signed his name with a flourish, and rushed out anxiously. The force of his exit sent Pearl stumbling, but she let out a soft sigh of relief. If only he had taken one more look, Ethan would have realized it was their divorce agreement. But he hadn't. His heart had room only for Juliet Quinn, but it didn't matter. Her heart would no longer have room for him, either. Looking at the familiar name on the document, she smiled faintly. From now on, she was she and he was he. They had nothing to do with each other anymore. Composing herself, she left the office. The hallway was now packed with people, forming a circle. In the center stood Juliet Quinn. She was wearing a patient's gown, barefoot, her face pale and streaked with tears. She looked like a fragile, broken flower, evoking pity from all who saw her. Just then, Juliet Quinn suddenly raised a pair of scissors in her hand and held them to her own neck. "You, all of you, stay back." Tears streamed down her face, her voice trembling. "If you come any closer, I'll kill myself right in front of you." Everyone was terrified. They tried to talk her down but dared not move any closer. Pearl tried to shift, to find a way out of the crowded hallway, but it was futile. The enclosed space made the sharp pain in her stomach flare up again. At that moment, Ethan stepped forward, his face full of heartache, and held out a hand to Juliet. "Julie, can you give me the scissors first, please? Don't hurt yourself." His tone was so gentle, a complete contrast to the ice-cold man in the office just moments before. Juliet seemed to be roused by his voice. She murmured, "Ethan, it's me, Julie, I'm here." Juliet looked at him with tear-filled eyes, her expression finally softening as she collapsed into his arms. Ethan swiftly took the scissors with one hand while gently stroking her dark hair with the other, a hint of helplessness in his voice. "Don't cry, Julie." The same name, yet it could be spoken with such tenderness and affection. In that moment, Pearl finally understood. The difference between being loved and not being loved was so painfully obvious. While she was lost in thought, Ethan had already swept Juliet into his arms. A round of applause erupted from the crowd. "I heard Dr. Cole and Dr. Quinn are childhood sweethearts. Their bond is so strong." Yes, and it was Dr. Cole who saved Dr. Quinn yesterday, too. They make such a great couple. I wonder when they'll get married." Amid the crowd's chatter, Ethan carried Juliet over to where Pearl was standing. Seeing Pearl, his brow slowly furrowed. Move the pain in her organs intensified. Pearl's legs felt weak and she stumbled. At the same time, Ethan's cold voice cut in without warning. "Are you going to say you don't feel well now, too?" Hearing this, Pearl's clear eyes fixed on his face. "You think I'm faking it?" 5 years of marriage, a face she knew to her bones, yet it felt as if she had never truly known this man. Her words made Ethan flinch, a wave of panic rising from deep within him. But just as he was about to speak, Pearl looked away, said nothing, and moved aside. Ethan watched her with a heavy gaze, feeling that something was terribly wrong. "Ethan, I feel so sick." Juliet's mournful voice pulled his attention back. He snapped out of his thoughts. "I'll take you back to your room." He then strode forward, carrying Juliet past Pearl. As the air stirred, she didn't miss the triumphant look in Juliet's eyes. The pain worsened, and Pearl could barely stand. She had to lean against the wall to steady herself. A kind onlooker couldn't help but step forward. "Are you okay? You look terrible. Do you want me to get you registered?" The stranger's kindness made Pearl's nose sting, but in the end, she just shook her head. When she got home, she began to pack her bags. Someone from the Research Institute would be coming to pick her up in the next couple of days for pre-donation tests. She was halfway through packing when she heard the sound of a key in the lock. Ethan walked in, holding Juliet's hand. He said gently, "Have a seat." Then he saw the neatly packed suitcase and looked stunned. "What are you doing?" Pearl hadn't expected him to come back at this hour, let alone with Juliet Quinn. But she didn't want any more trouble. She simply said, as if nothing were wrong, "These things are getting old. I was planning to pack them up and donate them to children in the mountains." Ethan took her at her word, his expression softening. "All right, we can buy new things later." Pearl's gaze fell on Juliet. Ethan instinctively stepped in front of Juliet, his eyes downcast. "The hospital isn't a good place to recover. She'll be staying here for a while." Pearl laughed coldly to herself. The hospital isn't a good place to recover? Then where is? But in the end, she just nodded. Juliet chose that moment to reach out and tug on Ethan's sleeve. "Ethan, who is she? Is she the maid you hired?" Ethan froze. Pearl watched with cold detachment. She knew exactly what Ethan's answer would be. After all, hadn't he kept their marriage a secret for all these years precisely for Juliet? As if to confirm Pearl's thoughts, Ethan finally let out a soft After agreeing, he instinctively glanced at Pearl, only to see her completely unfazed expression. It was as if she hadn't paid any mind to the conversation at all. He ignored the uncomfortable feeling in his gut, put his arm around Juliet, and ordered Pearl, "Go make something to eat. Her stomach is weak. She can't have anything cold." Okay, a shared fate. She wouldn't be able to attend their wedding banquet, so she might as well consider this an early celebration for them. Pearl got up and went to the kitchen. The voices behind her continued. "Ethan, can I sleep in that room tonight?" Ethan agreed without hesitation. "Of course," Pearl smirked. Their apartment was hospital-provided staff housing. It only had one bedroom. It seemed Ethan planned to give the master bedroom to Juliet and have her sleep in the living room. After setting the table, the three of them sat down. Ethan and Juliet sat side by side, with Pearl alone on the other side. "Ethan, will you feed me?" When it came to Juliet, Ethan could never say no. He picked up the spoon, blew on the food to cool it, and brought it to Juliet's lips, the entire process smooth and practiced. Pearl, however, didn't even spare them a glance. With her time running out, the stomach pains were becoming more frequent. Her back was already soaked in a cold sweat. Clutching her stomach, she got up and went to the restroom. Ethan paused, instinctively starting to rise, but Juliet held him back. "Ethan, I want to eat that." Meeting her shimmering gaze, Ethan suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and continued to feed her. By the time Pearl came out, the dining table was empty. Only a table of cold leftovers remained, waiting for her to clean up. She silently scraped the food into the trash. 10 minutes later, Ethan came into the kitchen. His handsome face showed a hint of fatigue and apology. "She's very fragile right now. She can't handle any stress." Pearl's hands were busy, her tone even flatter. At her response, Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that Pearl's attitude was incredibly strange. He said in a low voice, "I've given the master bedroom to Julie. You'll sleep in the living room for now." Having finally finished cleaning the kitchen, Pearl met Ethan's gaze and uttered a single word. That one word finally made Ethan understand what was so strange. He studied her with a probing look. "You don't mind?" Pearl walked past him, her tone ordinary. Staring at her thin back, Ethan's breath caught. "Actually," Pearl paid him no mind. Seeing this, Ethan's lips parted, about to say something. All of a sudden, ear-piercing scream rang out. For a split second, Pearl's mind went blank. She instinctively followed Ethan to the master bedroom door. Juliet Quinn was huddled in a corner, her eyes wide and wet. "Ethan, I'm so scared. Are you abandoning me?" Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed pitifully. Ethan could only approach slowly, cooing gentle reassurances. "I'm here. I won't abandon you." Juliet threw herself into his arms, burying her head in his chest. "Can you stay with me tonight?" "Okay, I'll stay with you," Ethan nodded immediately. Then, as if remembering something, he turned his expressionless face to Pearl. "Her situation is special. She needs someone with her. He was completely unaware that, in a corner he couldn't see, Juliet raised an eyebrow in triumph. Pearl saw it all and forced a small smile. He really didn't need to explain anything to her. She didn't care anyway. Ethan was taken aback, that strange feeling creeping back into his heart. This wasn't like her at all. Before, she used to care so much about him. She would never, ever be this cold to him. In the past, when she spoke to him, even if he didn't reply, she would go on and on. But now Ethan, the way your maid is looking at me is so scary, sob. Juliet hugged his waist tighter, her whole body trembling. A knot formed in Ethan's chest, and he instinctively wanted to tell Pearl to leave. But a glance revealed that Pearl had already backed away at some point and had even closed the bedroom door. Yet the woman in his arms continued to tremble. Ethan could only suppress the questions in his heart and focus on comforting her with even more tenderness. The next morning, Pearl woke up on the sofa, her body aching all over. All the blankets were in the master bedroom. She had been freezing all night, only managing to get some sleep after piling several thick coats on top of herself. As she sat up, the coats fell to the floor with a soft thud. The two people at the dining table turned to look at her in unison. Juliet was the first to greet her. "Good morning, Nanny. Come join us for breakfast. We saved some for you." Pearl's gaze shifted to the table, a bowl of plain white congee. In front of Juliet, however, was a bowl of fish and shrimp congee, along with 2 shumai dumplings with egg yolk. Pearl recognized them. They were from the Grandview, a place that always had a long line. She had once said she wanted to try it, but Ethan had dismissed it as all hype, not worth the trouble. Thinking back now, it was she who wasn't worthy. Pearl lowered her gaze, looking at Ethan in silence. She mumbled under her breath, "Am I not worthy?" "What?" Ethan was stunned for a moment, but when he saw that Pearl wasn't paying him any attention, he assumed he had misheard. "I'm working late today. I won't be home for dinner," Pearl replied, as if she were truly just a maid. Last night, on her way to the bathroom, she had passed the master bedroom and distinctly heard Ethan promise Juliet he would take her for a walk in the park today. Why did he need to lie to her? But she had no intention of exposing him. She just quietly watched them leave, hand in hand. Pearl began a deep clean of the apartment. She remembered when she first moved in, she would sweep the floor, then mop it, and then wipe it down again with a cloth. She had said she would cherish this home forever. But now, this was the last time she would clean it. She erased every trace of her presence. An hour later, the apartment was sparkling. Next, she went to the bedroom to find their savings passbook. Her salary over the years hadn't been much, but she had given it all to Ethan for safekeeping, and they had barely touched it. Now she wanted to take her share and donate it to the Red Cross. But when she opened the passbook, the balance was only a few dollars. Had they been robbed? Pearl's face changed. She immediately went to the local police precinct. She filed a report. A home burglary was a serious crime, and the precinct's deputy chief personally handled Pearl's case. She described in detail where the savings passbook was kept, as well as her and Ethan's work schedules, speculating that the culprit was likely an acquaintance. The deputy chief examined the passbook. The last withdrawal was yesterday. "Did you notice anything unusual at home?" Pearl bit the inside of her cheek, trying to recall. Yesterday, she had gone to get her photo taken and then went to the hospital. She had been home ever since she returned from the hospital. When could the thief have struck? Pearl frowned slightly. There was a nagging feeling that she had overlooked some detail. What was it? "Pearl Sterling," a cold voice snapped, pulling her back to reality. As she looked up, Ethan's tall figure stood in the doorway, his face grim. "I'm sorry, it was all a misunderstanding. We're withdrawing the case." He offered a polite explanation to the deputy chief, then strode over, grabbed Pearl's wrist, and dragged her outside. Once out of the precinct, he shoved her away. Before she could regain her balance, a furious accusation rained down on her. "Pearl Sterling, do you have to make a scene for everyone to see?" Pearl was slightly taken aback. "Money was stolen from our home. What's wrong with me filing a police report?" A vein throbbed in Ethan's forehead, his expression as dark as ink. "You just wanted to say that I gave the money to Julie for supplements, didn't you? Was it necessary to go through all this trouble?" Pearl's body trembled as if she'd been struck. She had scrimped and saved for years, and Ethan had spent it all without even batting an eye. She looked at him in disbelief. "Ethan, you spent all the money, and you weren't even going to tell me." being questioned, Ethan's face grew darker. What good would telling you have done? Pearl's voice was laced with a sob. But my entire salary was in there. A flash of shame crossed Ethan's face, as if he were lashing out in anger. He retorted sharply, "What do you mean your salary? This is marital property. I have the right to decide how this money is used. And you call yourself a top student? You can't even figure that out." He paused, then added with a heavy expression, "Money can be earned again, but a life is on the line. And you're here haggling over a little bit of money. Pearl Sterling, you are such a disappointment." With one last look of disgust, he stormed away. Pearl felt rooted to the spot, her eyes fixed on his retreating back until he disappeared from sight. His words were like poison-tipped daggers, each one cutting into her heart. It was only early winter, but she felt a bone-chilling cold. It was only at this moment that she truly understood what it meant to be utterly disappointed. She ought to be grateful. Tomorrow, they would never see each other again. The calendar finally turned to the 19th. Early that morning, Pearl changed into a red dress. Her body had grown thinner each day, and the once form-fitting dress now hung on her like a sack. Even Ethan cast a surprised glance her way. Pearl clenched her fists. "Today is our wedding anniversary. This was the first time they had spoken since her return from the police station. "Enough!" Ethan cut her off with a frown. "Have you had time to reflect on what happened yesterday?" Pearl raised her voice. "What I wanted to say is, that's enough." Seeing her complete lack of remorse, Ethan turned away without hesitation, his voice cold. "When you've figured things out, you can talk to me." With that, he walked out the door without a backward glance. Pearl blinked, her gaze clear and calm. She placed the divorce agreement on the coffee table. Then, picking up her suitcase, she left without looking back. For the rest of their lives, they would never meet again. The morning sun cast a bright glow outside. The bus from the Research Institute had already arrived to pick her up. Director Thompson came out personally. "Pearl, the entire institute and I are very grateful for your contribution." Pearl smiled faintly. "It's what I should do." She loved her work. To leave in this manner was the best possible outcome for her. She sat by the window, watching the reflections flash by. Before long, she saw Ethan and Juliet Quinn walking hand in hand along the side of the road. Her gaze remained placid as she calmly looked away. At that same moment, Ethan seemed to feel something. He looked up at the bus, his heart thumping with unease. Though it was just a fleeting glimpse, he felt as if he had seen Pearl. Juliet's sweet voice asked, "Ethan, what's wrong?" A sudden tightness constricted Ethan's chest. He let go of Juliet's hand. "I have something to do. You can go to the hospital by yourself." With that, he turned and walked away, his steps large and urgent, gradually breaking into a run. The memory of his coldness and anger toward her over the past 2 days flashed in his mind, and his guilt and anxiety grew. The front door opened. "I'm home." But there was no reply. The image of Pearl packing her suitcase that day flooded his mind. His face turned deathly pale, and he frantically searched every corner of the house. She was gone. Not only was Pearl gone, but everything related to her was gone as well. The empty house held not a single trace of her existence. As this thought took hold, the usually calm and composed Ethan completely lost his composure. His gaze fell upon the coffee table. When he saw the words on the cover, the blood in his veins seemed to flow backward. A divorce agreement? He lunged forward, flipping directly to the last page. Pearl Sterling, Ethan Cole. The familiar handwriting and names were like daggers stabbing at his eyes. When had he signed this? In that instant, all the details and strange feelings he had previously ignored came rushing back to him. No wonder Pearl had been at the law firm. No wonder she had been so indifferent to him and Juliet lately. His hand, holding the document, trembled uncontrollably. He was utterly panicked. Did Pearl not want him anymore? Impossible, she loved him so much. How could she let go? She was just angry, deliberately trying to make him worry. That had to be it. He bolted out the door and rushed to the Research Institute. A staff member stopped him. "Who are you? Unauthorized personnel are not allowed here." Ethan said urgently, "I need to see Pearl Sterling. I'm her husband." It was the first time he had ever acknowledged his marital relationship with Pearl. The staff member was surprised. "You're her husband, and you don't know she had cancer and has already passed away." Ethan froze, nearly stumbling. "When did this happen?" The staff member's eyes immediately grew wary. She even donated her body. You don't even know that. Are you really her husband? Boom. It was as if something had exploded in his ears. Ethan stood frozen in place, unable to hear anything at all. A frosty rain began to fall from the sky, chilling him to the bone. Ethan didn't know how he made it back home. It was as if his soul had been ripped from his body. In his blank mind, the staff member's 2 sentences echoed relentlessly. You're her husband, and you don't know she had cancer and has already passed away? She even donated her body. You don't even know that. Are you really her husband? Yes, was he really her husband? Why didn't he know anything? His Pearl had cancer and was gone. She had left him forever. His heart felt as if a giant hole had been torn through it. The cold wind and frost rushed in, and an icy, piercing pain spread through his entire body. He numbly opened the door to his home, and memories flooded in. In the past, whenever he came home, the lights would be on. The small apartment would be filled with a warm, cozy atmosphere. His Pearl would have already cooked dinner for him, softly telling him about her day. Memories, like countless sharp thorns, pierced his flesh and sank into his bones. He was in so much pain he could barely stand. From now on, among the countless lights of the city, the one that Pearl had always lit for him would be gone forever. Ethan, you're back. A sweet voice suddenly broke the silence. Ethan looked up to see Juliet Quinn walking out of the bedroom. The bedroom that was his and Pearl's room. It was where they had slept side by side for 5 years. Oh my, what happened to you? Did something go wrong? Juliet stepped forward to take his arm, only to find him completely soaked and his face deathly pale. But Ethan brushed her hand away and asked coldly, "What are you doing here?" Juliet was taken aback. "I was waiting for you to come home." Home. But this was his and Pearl's home. Now that Pearl was gone, what home did he have left? He looked around the apartment in a daze, but he couldn't find a single trace of Pearl's existence. Only in the air lingered a faint scent. It was the unique, sweet fragrance that belonged to Pearl. His body shook violently, his lips trembling. He suddenly rushed forward and slammed the window shut. He had to keep this air, to hold on to the last remaining scent of his Pearl. "Ethan, what's wrong with you?" Juliet felt that he was acting very strangely today. Ethan was in no mood to explain. He just said coolly, "You should go." Juliet was stunned. "You're telling me to go? Where can I go?" For the first time, Ethan lost his patience with her. "To the hospital, of course. Don't you have a dorm there? Go stay there." This was his and Pearl's home. He didn't want it tainted by anyone else's presence. "Ethan," Juliet looked at him in disbelief. But she quickly asked with concern, "Did something happen? Can you tell me about it?" Ethan found Juliet incredibly annoying. He didn't want to say anything. He just wanted to be alone. But then he heard Juliet ask, "By the way, where's Pearl?" At the mention of that name, a sharp pain shot through Ethan's heart and his breath caught in his throat. His lips parted, his voice raspy and broken. She had cancer, but he couldn't bring himself to say the words, and she's gone. It was as if, as long as he didn't say it, Pearl would still be there. He didn't notice the flash of ecstatic joy in Juliet's eyes. The next second, he heard Juliet say consolingly, "What a pity. But don't be too sad. She was just a maid. If one is gone, you can just find another." Her words made Ethan's face change dramatically. "What nonsense are you talking about? She wasn't a maid," Juliet feigned ignorance. "How could that be? You admitted it yourself, didn't you?" It was like a blow to the head, and his anger instantly froze into ice. Ethan's sore spot had been hit. His stomach cramped violently, and regret spread through him like a wildfire. Yes, he had been the one to admit it. How could he have been such a bastard? Just as he was drowning in remorse, a soft body pressed against him. Juliet hugged him, her fingers tracing his waist. "Ethan, she's gone now. Life has to go on. You're soaked to the bone. Let me help you with a bath, okay?" Her breath was warm and fragrant, her voice and actions filled with seduction. But Ethan suddenly shoved her away. "I'm tired today. You should go back. I need to rest." With that, he turned and went into the bedroom without a backward glance. On the nightstand lay a file. His heart pounded. Thinking it was something Pearl had left behind, he rushed over and snatched it up. But a closer look revealed it was Juliet's physical examination report. Right, the hospital had just organized a full-body checkup for all staff 2 days ago. But the contents of this report, Ethan's eyes scanned the page, and his face instantly turned pale with shock, not wanting to miss her chance. Juliet had followed him in. She let out a sudden "oh" and looked flustered. That was the checkup report she had just gotten back today. She hadn't had time to hide it yet. "Juliet Quinn, didn't you say you had a serious stomach condition? Why does this report show that all your vitals are normal?" Juliet said in a panic. "Ethan, let me explain. I really wasn't feeling well before." Ethan's eyes were smoldering with rage. "Not feeling well? You told me you were in the early stages of stomach cancer." Juliet had never seen Ethan this angry before. She was completely stunned and forgot how to even make an excuse. Ethan's hand clenched the report so tightly that the veins on the back of his hand bulged. "You lied to me, you actually lied to me." If she hadn't told him she had just been diagnosed with stomach cancer and needed to take medicine and rest, would he have spent all this time hovering around her? And his wife, the one who truly had cancer, terminal cancer at that, he had been completely oblivious. He had even given all their savings to Juliet. Juliet had said she needed to buy medicine and supplements. She said she would borrow the money for now and pay it back later. He hadn't expected her to pay it back. He had just thought that over the long years of their marriage, he would slowly use his own salary to replace the money Pearl had saved. But now, he would never have the chance. Remembering Pearl's questions and disappointment, he felt as if 1,000 arrows had pierced his heart. The pain and regret were so intense he felt like he was dying. He suddenly threw the file at Juliet. Get out of here, right now. If she hadn't lied to him, how could he have ignored his Pearl? Juliet was terrified, and tears started to fall instantly. "Ethan, how can you kick me out? I lied to you, but it was only because I love you. You love me." Ethan gritted his teeth and let out a cold laugh, as if he had heard the most ridiculous joke. "Yes, it's because I love you that I wanted to stay by your side. What's wrong with that?" Juliet sobbed pitifully and suddenly threw herself into Ethan's arms. "Not only do I love you, but you love me too. We've been childhood sweethearts for so many years. How could Pearl Sterling ever compare? It's all her fault. She's the one who stole you from me. I was just trying to win you back. We're the ones who are truly in love." Ethan pushed her away again. A realization dawned on him, and his eyes turned bloodshot, wide with fury. "So you knew all along that she was my wife?" Juliet froze, realizing she had let it slip. Ethan's face was ashen as he ground out the words. "You pretended not to know, called her a maid. You were deliberately making things difficult for her." Juliet's heart pounded. She squeezed out more tears, looking utterly pathetic. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to back down. You love me, so you should be with me." "You're lying," Ethan roared. How could he possibly love Juliet? He was just taking care of her. Why won't you admit it? You've always loved me. Otherwise, you wouldn't have ignored Pearl Sterling for my sake. Besides, you knew everything I was doing. It's because you love me that you didn't stop me, that you treated her that way, isn't it? In an instant, Ethan's face became terrifyingly grim. It was true. He was the one who brought Juliet home. He was the one who allowed Juliet to take over the bed that belonged to Pearl. And he was the one who watched as Juliet treated Pearl like a maid. What had he done all these days? He had neglected Pearl. He had cared for and accompanied Juliet right in front of her, while completely ignoring her. How could he have been so cruel? He was nothing but a bastard. At some point, Juliet had pressed against him again, tilting her head up to kiss his lips. "Ethan, isn't it better without Pearl? Now we can be together?" Before she could finish, Ethan shoved her away with such force that she fell to the floor. Ethan's eyes were blazing with fury, his voice squeezed from between his teeth. "I don't love you, get out." Juliet was stunned. "Ethan, you're telling me to get out?" Her eyes filled with tears, looking utterly heartbroken. But that trick no longer worked on Ethan. Consumed by rage, he grabbed her, dragged her up, and threw her out of the house. He ignored her as she pounded on the door outside. It was the next-door neighbor, annoyed by the noise, who finally yelled at Juliet until she left. At last, there was quiet. Ethan sat on the sofa, completely lost. His gaze drifted into the empty space, finally settling on the divorce agreement. In an instant, a heart-wrenching pain washed over him again. With red-rimmed eyes, he picked up the document. He wanted to tear it up, but couldn't bring himself to do it. This was the last thing Pearl had left him. If he destroyed it, he would have nothing left. Flipping to the last page, he stared at the familiar, elegant handwriting. His eyes stung. He traced her name with his fingertips, over and over, his heart filled with regret and longing. Juliet said he loved her. Did Pearl think so too? But he knew very well that he no longer loved Juliet. He helped her and took care of her only because they were childhood sweethearts, because of their old friendship. Over the years of his marriage, his heart had long since been filled by Pearl. The person he loved had always been Pearl. Unfortunately, by the time he realized it, it was too late. He had always known how much Pearl loved him, and he had always taken it for granted, squandering her affection without a second thought. But he had forgotten that even the deepest love can be exhausted. Not just recently, but for years, he had done so many foolish things he knew Pearl loved him, yet he repeatedly ignored and neglected her. She tolerated him, and he only became more reckless. He couldn't even imagine what Pearl had gone through during this time. Watching him and Juliet together, all while enduring the torment of cancer. How much pain must she have been in, and how disappointed must she have been to not even tell him about her illness. She must have reached the absolute limit of disappointment to sign the divorce papers, wanting no connection to him even in death. Realizing this, Ethan's face turned deathly pale, the pain in his heart unbearable. An overwhelming wave of regret threatened to swallow him whole. "Julie, I was wrong." The man who had always been so calm and self-possessed was now weeping uncontrollably. He counted his mistakes over the years, his heart aching for Pearl's forbearance and suffering. He sat like that for the entire night. The next day, when the lawyer came to the door, he was startled by Ethan's haggard appearance. The usually neat and tidy Ethan was now completely disheveled. His handsome face was pale and bluish, and a layer of stubble covered his chin. It was as if he were the one on the brink of death. What surprised the lawyer even more was his question. "You're Miss Sterling's husband. But I thought your wife was Miss Quinn." After the previous day's blow and a sleepless night, Ethan looked as if half his life had been drained away, leaving him with just enough breath to hang on. He glanced at the lawyer, his voice raspy. "What are you here for?" He paused, then added, "Juliet Quinn has nothing to do with me. If you're here about her, go find her yourself." The lawyer looked puzzled, but then realization dawned, and his gaze toward Ethan held a hint of disdain. "Mr. Cole, I'm here on behalf of Miss Sterling." A flicker of life returned to Ethan's eyes. "For her, what is it?" He suddenly leaned forward eagerly. "Did she leave a message for me?" The lawyer shook his head. "It's about Miss Sterling's will." The lawyer opened a file and pushed it across to him. "Although you and Miss Sterling are divorced, the will was written while you were still married, so I am required to inform you. Miss Sterling has decided to donate her body to the Research Institute." Ethan already knew this. The so-called will was just a single, thin page with very few words. His throat felt raw as he swallowed, as if it were filled with gravel. "Did she say anything else? Did she mention me?" "No." His last shred of hope was crushed. Ethan slumped back, utterly dejected. "She wouldn't even leave me a single word. How resolute must she have been to do something like that?" It felt as if his flesh were being peeled from his bones, each one being shattered. The heart-wrenching pain, accompanied by the taste of blood, rose in his throat. Ethan suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, splattering crimson across the will. The lawyer was horrified. "Mr. Cole," Ethan waved a hand. "I'm fine." His face was pale, but his eyes and lips were stained a bloody red. The lawyer found it hard to watch and felt a sliver of pity. "Mr. Cole, if you had known it would come to this, why did you act that way in the first place?" Ethan didn't speak. He took a tissue and began to wipe the bloodstains from the will, then held it to his chest almost reverently. The lawyer sighed and stood up. "I have delivered the will. If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way." At the door, he suddenly paused. "By the way, Mr. Cole, there's something you should probably know." Ethan didn't turn around, as if he no longer cared about anything in the world. The lawyer continued on his own. "Miss Quinn's legal dispute abroad isn't as simple as she made it out to be. The deceased wasn't her adoptive mother, but her mother-in-law. Without a will, she had no right to the inheritance. But she wanted a share of the estate. The husband disagreed and wanted a divorce. She dragged it out, refusing to sign unless he gave her $3 million. Now the husband has filed for divorce and is accusing her of taking marital assets when she returned to the country. He wants the money back. She's refusing. It's almost certain she will lose the case. I imagine that when you accompanied her to the law firm, the reason she wouldn't let you into the office and made you wait outside was because she didn't want you to know the truth." With that, the lawyer left. Ethan's face turned ashen, a deathly pallor setting in. How could this be? Juliet had told him the deceased was her adoptive mother. She said her adoptive mother had promised her the inheritance, but her adoptive brother had torn up the will and refused to give it to her. It was all a lie. She had lied to him again. It wasn't an adoptive mother and brother at all, but her mother-in-law and husband. She was already married and was trying to run off with all of her husband's and his family's assets. How had he never noticed before that she had told so many lies? He suddenly thought of the savings passbook. That large sum of money couldn't have been spent just on supplements. Juliet had been faking her illness all along. She had deliberately tricked him out of that money. That money included the savings his Pearl had scrimped and saved for years. In an instant, rage shot to the top of his head. He leaped to his feet and stormed toward the hospital. The hospital staff were stunned to see his disheveled state. "Dr. Cole, you..." Ethan paid them no mind, striding toward Juliet Quinn's office. As he reached the door, he heard voices from inside. "Dr. Quinn, this isn't much money. It's not what we agreed on." The voice was somewhat familiar, but Ethan couldn't place it. Then he heard Juliet say, "What are you doing here? What if someone recognizes you?" The man laughed menacingly. "If you don't want me to be recognized, then give me the money. I spent several days in a holding cell for helping you with your act. You think you can get rid of me with this little bit? No way an act." Ethan's body went rigid, and he threw the door open. Bang! The door slammed against the wall, startling the two people inside. Juliet shot to her feet, her face a mask of panic. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" The other person was also shocked and quickly pulled on a mask and hat, but Ethan had already seen his face. It was the same mad patient who had taken Juliet hostage. He lunged forward, grabbed the man by the collar, and ripped off his mask and hat. "It was you," he glared at the man, his entire presence radiating a terrifying pressure. He then snapped his head toward Juliet. "So you two were in on it together, just to put on a show to trick me?" His roar immediately drew a crowd to the doorway. "Oh my God, isn't that the mad patient? He's the one who held Dr. Quinn hostage last time, so it was all an act?" Dr. Quinn was so convincing, she even pretended to commit suicide. "She fooled me completely." The hallway filled with murmurs, all of them filled with disdain and contempt for Juliet. Juliet was frantic, trembling so much she could barely stand. She shook her head repeatedly. "It wasn't me, I didn't." But the man, terrified by Ethan, confessed without any prompting. Don't hit me, it has nothing to do with me. She paid me to stage a hostage situation at the hospital. She even said as long as I didn't really hurt her, and just pretended to be crazy, I wouldn't go to jail. She also said she had to make sure you saw it, that way you would feel sorry for her. Ethan's grip on his collar tightened, his rage nearly consuming him. That Juliet Quinn, she had been lying to him from the very beginning. The hostage situation, her emotional fragility, it was all a charade she had orchestrated. Even moving into his home was exactly what she had wanted, and for this kind of person, he had hurt Pearl Sterling over and over again. He suddenly grabbed the man's hair, slammed his head against the ground, and then delivered a vicious kick to his stomach. He had never shown such a violent side before. Everyone was stunned into silence. Juliet was terrified too. She called out his name, trembling, Ethan, but Ethan cut her off with a sharp retort. "Don't call me that. It makes me sick." His handsome face was filled with disgust, his eyes dark with fury. "I was a fool to be deceived by you before, but don't worry, it won't happen again." His voice was chilling, devoid of any remaining affection, sharp and merciless. "You hired someone to disrupt the peace of this hospital and filed a false police report. You will pay the price for that. And the money you swindled from me, you will return every last cent. Otherwise, I'll see you in court." With that, he told someone to call the police. Juliet's face turned ashen, and she collapsed to the floor in a heap. Scornful jeers rose from the crowd. Serves her right for being a liar. An overseas returnee, and she wastes her mind on schemes instead of her work. She acts like such an innocent flower, but who knew she was so disgusting and shameless? Juliet's facade had been torn away in public. Her face flushed red and white with shame. She was so mortified she was on the verge of fainting. The man, aching all over from the beating and seeing no escape, took his anger out on her. "You bitch, this is all your fault." Slap, slap, he grabbed her hair and slapped her face repeatedly. Her once pretty face was now swollen and bruised, a pitiful sight. yet no one stepped in to stop him. Ethan didn't even spare her a glance as he turned and walked away. Soon, the police car arrived and took the two away, finally bringing the farce to an end. Ethan stood across the street, watching the police car drive away. He looked up at the sky and murmured, "Julie, did you see that? If you did, can you forgive me?" I really know I was wrong. On the way home, Ethan was completely lost. Without Pearl Sterling, life seemed to have lost its meaning. His world was devoid of color. All that remained was endless pain and regret, tormenting him to the brink of madness. "Excuse me, sir, please wait a moment." Someone suddenly called out to him. He turned around blankly, realizing he was passing by the photo studio. An employee recognized him. "Sir, your wife was in a hurry when she had her photo taken last time. She forgot to take the negatives." Negatives. Ethan's eyes flickered, a spark of life returning. He had promised to retake their wedding photo with Pearl. And on that very day, he had been tricked away by Juliet Quinn. Regret flooded him like a tidal wave. His eyes were bloodshot as he said urgently, "Could you print another copy for me?" The employee was startled by his appearance. "Your wife, she hasn't?" Ethan's lips moved, but no words came out. The employee understood instantly. He developed the photo and handed it to him along with the negatives. "Sir, what's done is done. My condolences." Looking at the beautiful, familiar face in the black and white photograph, Ethan burst into tears. Perhaps heaven had taken pity on him, leaving him this one small memento. He held the photograph and looked at it all night, his longing growing stronger. He suddenly felt this wasn't enough. Although they were divorced, it wasn't of his own free will. "Julie, I didn't know it was a divorce agreement. If I had known, I never would have signed it. I love you so much, how could I ever leave you? I don't agree to this, you will always be my wife. In life and in death, you are mine." He suddenly rushed to the research institute. He had to see Pearl one last time. No matter what, she was his wife. Even if she had already donated her body to the institute, he had to at least be allowed to see her. The staff were shocked when they recognized him. In just 2 short days, Ethan had completely transformed. He was so thin he was almost unrecognizable, devoid of any vitality, wandering like a walking corpse. "Sir, what are you?" "Pearl Sterling, I want to see her." "That's not possible. Donated bodies belong to the institute. Outsiders are not permitted to view them." Ethan pleaded, "But she is my wife." "That doesn't matter, it's against the rules and I don't have the authority." "Then who does?" The staff member shook his head. "It's no use asking, it's impossible. You should go home." But Ethan refused to leave. He stood guard at the main gate of the institute. Whenever someone entered or exited, he would stop them and beg them to let him see Pearl. "I'm her husband. I didn't even get to see her one last time. Please, I beg you, let me go in and see her. Please, just one look, let me see her one more time." He missed her so much. He even cast aside the last shred of his dignity and knelt before the director. His former pride and self-respect were trampled underfoot, with no trace of the golden boy he once was. All just to see Pearl one last time. However, without exception, he was refused every time. The director shook his head and sighed. "Why are you doing this to yourself? I won't leave until I see her." Ethan remained kneeling, his eyes filled with a tragic determination. But the director told him, "It's not that I won't let you see her. It's that Pearl won't allow it." Ethan's body trembled violently. He looked up at him, his eyes filled with disbelief. "What did you say? How could she?" "She didn't know if you would come, but the last words she left were that she never wanted to see you again, in this life or the next. Never to see him again, in this life or the next." It was as if all the strength had been drained from him. Ethan collapsed onto the ground, his face a mask of emptiness. Another sigh. The director said, "I don't know what happened between you two, but Pearl has suffered enough. Let her go." Let her go? Then how was he supposed to let himself go? She had left just like that, so freely, without even letting him see her one last time. She had left him all alone. How was he supposed to go on? To never see him again? Did she hate him that much? That couldn't be right. She loved him so much. He still remembered their days in the rural outreach program. He remembered her beautiful, vibrant face. He remembered her blushing cheeks that night. He remembered the endless joy and anticipation in her autumn-like eyes. When did everything change? Was it because she loved him too much that she now hated him so intensely? That must be it. As if brainwashing himself, Ethan thought this over and over. How could he be content with them being separated by life and death like this? No matter what, he had to see her one last time that night. He waited for the security guard to be distracted, then secretly climbed over the high wall of the research institute and snatched the keys. Once inside the main building, he began to search room by room, trying to find Pearl's body. But it was completely dark, and he couldn't see clearly. He accidentally knocked over a beaker on a table. The light suddenly flashed on, and a sharp voice called out, "Who's there?" Ethan's heart pounded. He turned to run, but was cornered by the security guard. "I knew there was a reason you weren't at the gate tonight, so it was you." The director was also alerted and rushed over, frowning. "What's going on?" The guard immediately reported, "Director, this man stole my keys and illegally broke into the institute. We need to take him to the police station immediately." Ethan's face was grim, his voice hoarse. "I just came in to find my wife. I just want to see her one last time." He was a mess, his face pale and haggard. The guard, worried about being held responsible for the stolen keys, was harsh. "I already told you no, you didn't cherish her when she was alive, and now you regret it after she's dead. Where were you then?" Those simple words were like a blade, slicing through Ethan's already shattered heart. He was speechless, his face a mask of defeat. The guard moved to restrain him, but the director stopped him. He looked at Ethan with a complex expression. "You can't bring the dead back to life. Why must you be so stubborn? Even if you could see Pearl one last time, what would it change?" Ethan managed a bitter smile. "It wouldn't change anything, but I miss her." He missed her so much he was going mad, so much he could barely breathe. The director sighed. "If you had been like this before, things between you and Pearl wouldn't have come to this." Ethan was silent. Yes, if only he had seen his own heart sooner. If only he hadn't been deceived by Juliet Quinn at the very least, he would have cherished their last moments together, cared for her, and looked after her. He wouldn't have let her walk that final journey all alone. Seeing him like this, the director seemed to soften. After a moment of hesitation, he finally sighed. "Fine, I'll tell you. The truth is, Pearl isn't dead." At those words, Ethan froze. He stared at the director blankly, as if trying to process the meaning of his words. "What did you say? She's not dead. Is that true?" His eyes, which had been like stagnant pools of water, suddenly lit up with an irrepressible joy. "You're not lying to me. She's really not dead. Then where is she?" The director sighed. "We all thought she was in the terminal stage. Even the test results confirmed it. But after she came to the institute, we ran one last check on her and found that the hospital's diagnosis was wrong. She does have cancer, but it's in the early stages." Early stages? Ethan didn't know whether to be happy or worried. Yes, it's just that her body had such a severe reaction that even she didn't realize it. Is there still a chance for a cure? That's hard to say. The director considered. But since it was caught early, with proper treatment, it's possible to cure it. The feeling of having lost and then found something so precious made Ethan tremble all over. Where is she now? Is she receiving treatment at a hospital somewhere? Well, the director hesitated, unsure if he should continue. Ethan suddenly rushed forward and knelt before him again, without a moment's hesitation. "Director, I beg you, please tell me. I'm her husband. I should be by her side, taking care of her. They say a man does not cry easily, that a man's knees are worth their weight in gold." But for Pearl Sterling, he no longer cared about any of that. As long as he could be by her side, he would do anything. The director hesitated again and again, but he couldn't resist Ethan's constant pleading. He finally gave him an address. As it happens, a medical professor just returned from studying abroad. I sent him Pearl's medical files. He's an expert in this field. After reviewing them, he said he could treat her and took her in. Pearl has had a very hard life. Besides you, she doesn't have much family. You should go see her. But whether you can see her or not, that will be up to fate. Ethan clutched the address, overjoyed. After thanking the director, he hurried away. His Julie was still alive. He still had a chance to make amends. He would go to her, tell her she was the love of his life, and beg for her forgiveness. This time, no matter what, he would never let her go again. Bayside City Hospital. Pearl Sterling sat on a bench in the back garden, relaxing in the sun and reading a book. Though she was dressed in a simple patient's gown, she seemed to radiate a light brighter than the sun itself. Since coming here, she had felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Who would have thought that just as she had prepared to face death, fate would play such a trick on her? When she learned she didn't have terminal cancer, but early stage, she could hardly believe it herself. In that moment, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Later, on the director's recommendation, she came here for treatment. This time, fate did not deceive her. She actually began to get better. For her, it was nothing short of a rebirth. And she cooperated fully with the treatment, seizing this hard 1-second chance at life. A long, slender finger with well-defined knuckles suddenly reached out and took the book from her hands. She looked up to see a handsome figure standing against the light, smiling down at her with gentle eyes. "Didn't I tell you not to read in the sun? It's bad for your eyes." Pearl blinked. "I just didn't want to waste such beautiful sunlight." The man chuckled. "If you don't want to waste it, how about a walk?" Pearl glanced at the white coat he was wearing. "Won't this interrupt your work?" The man smiled faintly. "No, it's almost my lunch break. We can take a walk and then have lunch together." He held out his handsome hand. "Shall we?" Pearl's cheeks flushed slightly. She didn't take his hand. "I can walk by myself." The man chuckled softly. "I wonder who it was that couldn't walk straight during our stroll yesterday and needed me to hold their hand." Pearl was embarrassed. "That was because my stomach hurt." The man nodded. "Good thing it was just from eating too much. Otherwise, I might have thought my medical skills were lacking and your condition was getting worse." His words only made Pearl more flustered. Yesterday, she had been greedy and eaten a few extra bites, which had unexpectedly upset her stomach. Since her cancer diagnosis, she had lost her appetite and could barely eat anything. These past few days of treatment had finally brought her appetite back, and she could eat without feeling sick afterward. And for all of this, she had the man walking beside her to thank. He was the doctor the director had introduced her to, Dr. Alistair Vance. Before meeting him, she had imagined an older man. She never expected him to be so young, only 3 years her senior. Not only was he young, but he was also incredibly handsome, more so than any man she had ever met. Most importantly, his medical skills were exceptional. After just a short period of treatment, her health had already shown significant improvement. "Dr. Vance, you don't need to doubt yourself. Your skills are excellent." "I'm very grateful." Alistair Vance glanced at her, a smile in his eyes. "No need for formalities. You've taught me a lot about the language and helped me settle in here. We're helping each other. From now on, I'll be counting on you, Professor Sterling." Though he was an overseas returnee, Alistair had never actually lived in the country before. He had moved abroad with his parents shortly after he was born, so he had learned the language on his own. But without an immersive environment, he sometimes struggled with the finer nuances. Fortunately, Pearl was a top student and spoke fluent English. Whenever he had trouble, she would act as his translator and even teach him a few things. Pearl smiled. "It's the least I can do." As soon as the words left her mouth, she saw Alistair stop. "Nothing is the least you can do. No matter the relationship, effort should be appreciated. It needs to be reciprocated to be worthwhile." Pearl froze, staring up at him blankly. Alistair smiled and gently tapped her on the head. "Why are you looking so dazed?" "No reason, it's just the first time I've heard something like that." No one had ever told her before that effort should be appreciated and reciprocated. After marrying Ethan Cole, she had been the one constantly giving. But to Ethan, everything she did was expected. And he had simply accepted her efforts with entitlement, never giving anything in return. Let alone thanks, he probably felt she hadn't done enough. "What are you thinking about?" Alistair's gentle voice pulled Pearl back from her thoughts. She smiled faintly and shook her head. "Nothing. Let's go." Since coming to Bayside, she rarely thought about Ethan. Even when she did, she felt nothing. She had truly let go. For her, he was now in the past. The bright sun chased away the winter chill, making it feel warm. She smiled with a sense of release, her steps slow but light. The road ahead was long, and life went on. She still had a beautiful future to walk toward. And this time, she would not make the wrong turn again. After lunch, while Alistair Vance was peeling fruit, a few interns came in for their routine rounds. As soon as they entered, they started their familiar teasing. "Professor, Mrs. Doc, sorry to interrupt your private time." Pearl's cheeks flushed slightly as she gave them a mock glare. "There you go with your nonsense again." The interns scratched their heads and grinned, their young faces full of cheerful goodwill. They were Alastair's students and members of his medical team who had followed him back to the country to work at this hospital. Since they were close in age, Pearl got along well with them, like friends. Friends. Since marrying Ethan Cole, Pearl hadn't had any friends for a long time. Her life had revolved around her work at the Institute and that cold, empty home. Ethan had consumed her entire life, making her almost forget that she could have had so much more. Thankfully, it wasn't too late. She could be herself again, enjoying a new and different life. Alastair handed the peeled apple to Pearl, then raised an eyebrow at his students. "She's a bit shy. Don't tease her so much." The students let out a long, drawn-out ooh, their teasing tone unmistakable. After they left the room, Alastair turned his gentle eyes to Pearl. "They're just joking around. If it made you uncomfortable, I apologize on their behalf." Pearl shook her head. "I'm not uncomfortable. You don't need to apologize." As the words left her mouth, her cheeks involuntarily blushed. Alastair's eyes flickered, and he suddenly asked in a low voice, "So, you don't mind them calling you that?" Pearl's eyelashes fluttered, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know they're just kidding." Alastair wanted to ask more, but seeing her with her eyes half lowered, he said no more. "Finish your fruit and get some rest. The results from your morning tests should be out soon. I'll go check on them." "Okay." Leaving the room, Alastair caught up with the students who were coming out of another room. "You guys, don't joke with her like that anymore. It makes her self-conscious." They first agreed, then lowered their voices to tease him. "Professor, you're not even together yet and you're already so protective." "Exactly, Professor. We can all see you like Pearl. When are you going to confess?" "You and Pearl are a perfect match. We're all waiting for our wedding invitations." Alastair's eyes narrowed slightly. "Nothing's even started, and you're all thinking further ahead than I am." "Of course you're our professor. We're just concerned about your future." "I appreciate the sentiment, but it's not necessary. She's timid. I'm afraid you'll scare her away. Besides, the most important thing right now is her health. Her treatment comes first." The students all nodded in understanding, but couldn't help but sigh. The professor has really fallen for her. He's so devoted. The group continued their conversation as they walked down the hall. The next second, a tall figure emerged from around the corner. Ethan Cole, holding a bouquet of red roses, watched Alastair's retreating figure, his expression grim. As soon as he learned Pearl was here, he had arranged his work and rushed over. He was full of joy, had even bought flowers, and was prepared to see her. He had also decided that no matter what her attitude was, he would not give up. But he never expected to overhear such a conversation. In an instant, a sense of crisis filled his heart, and his hand holding the flowers tightened unconsciously. He stood at the door to her room for a long time before finally summoning the courage to knock. "Come in." Alastair had arranged a private room for Pearl, so she was alone. She thought it was Alastair with her test results and looked up with a smile. But the smile vanished from her eyes the next second. Ethan walked in, holding the flowers, his expression full of deep affection. "Julie, I'm sorry, I'm late." The smile on Pearl Sterling's beautiful face was gone, replaced only by cold indifference. "What are you doing here?" As if stung by her coldness, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His lips parted, his voice hoarse, as if filled with sand. "I came to apologize, to make amends, and to be with you to take care of you. Julie, I was wrong." After so long, hearing the name Julie again stirred no emotion in Pearl's heart. "Mr. Cole, we're divorced. Calling me by such an intimate name is inappropriate. It makes me feel disgusted." The word disgusted was like a sharp knife, stabbing deep into Ethan's heart. His handsome face turned as white as paper, his eyes filled with shattered pain. "I know you hate me, but I haven't agreed to the divorce, so it doesn't count. Julie, you are my wife, and the person I love most. I was wrong before. I was deceived by Juliet Quinn. Now I see her for who she really is. I won't trust her anymore, and I've even gotten revenge for you. Can you forgive me?" Pearl watched him with cold eyes, then suddenly curled her lips into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ethan Cole, is this the same false sincerity you used to trick Director Thompson into giving you my location?" Ethan was stunned. He hadn't expected his heartfelt confession to be met with such a response. "How could you think that?" "Then what am I supposed to think?" Pearl's words were sharp as daggers. "Ethan Cole, the divorce agreement was signed in black and white. No one forced you. It's too late to go back on it now. You and I, the moment you signed your name, we became strangers. As for love, as if she had heard the most ridiculous joke, Pearl scoffed. Ethan Cole, stop pretending you don't love me. The person you've loved most, from beginning to end, is yourself. Ethan's pupils constricted, his rugged face turning cold and hard. Julie, you don't believe me. In your heart, is my love now completely worthless? Without a second thought, Pearl answered, yes. Ethan's body jolted, and he actually swayed on his feet. In that moment, the man who had always been so calm and self-possessed seemed as fragile as paper, as if he couldn't withstand another blow. But Pearl remained unmoved. Do you think our marriage fell apart because of Juliet Quinn? Isn't it? If she hadn't shown up, before he could finish, Pearl cut him off coolly. Even if she hadn't shown up, I still would have divorced you. Ethan's lips turned white as he stared at Pearl. Why? When you can no longer feel love, it's time to leave. Pearl spoke with an air of detachment, her heart completely calm. Ethan Cole, perhaps the beginning of our marriage had something to do with Juliet Quinn, but after that, it was just a problem between the two of us. In the 5 years I was married to you, I got used to your neglect and coldness. My love for you was worn away by one disappointment after another. Ethan clenched his jaw, refusing to face the truth. How is that possible? You loved me so much, Pearl nodded. I admit, I did love you very much before. A glimmer of hope appeared in Ethan's eyes, but then he heard her continue, but that was before. It's all in the past. Pearl looked at him calmly, her eyes holding neither sadness nor joy. Even the greatest love can't withstand being squandered. No one can give without expecting anything in return, and no one will wait in the same place forever. What's missed is missed. You hurt the person who loved you, so you have to accept the fact that you are no longer loved. In an instant, everything was silent. Ethan's face was filled with disbelief. You don't love me anymore? How is that possible? I don't believe it. His eyes were bloodshot, his handsome face contorted in pain. He asked, almost begging, Julie, are you still angry with me, so you're saying these things to hurt me? You hate me, so you want to get back at me. But Pearl shook her head calmly, her voice flat. No, I'm not angry with you, and I don't hate you. To me, you are just a part of my past. You no longer have any meaning. A part of the past? No longer have any meaning. All of Ethan's joy and apprehension were shattered in that moment. The pain was so intense it drove him mad. Our 5 years of marriage are just a part of the past. How am I supposed to accept that, just as the words left his mouth, the door suddenly swung open with a whoosh? A deep, stern voice followed. Whether you can accept it or not is your problem. Pearl needs to rest. Please leave. Dr. Alistair Vance had returned. He strode to Pearl Sterling's side, his voice gentle again when he spoke to her. I was passing by and heard voices, so I came to check on you. It's time for you to sleep. You need to rest more so your body can heal faster. Then he turned to Ethan Cole, his eyes seemingly polite but layered with a cold frost. Sir, are you not leaving? The moment Alistair appeared, Ethan's expression had changed, his eyes filled with hostility and anger. Who are you? What right do you have to tell me to leave? Alistair smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. I am a doctor at this hospital, Pearl's attending physician and her friend. So what? I'm her husband, Ethan retorted coldly. The words had barely left his mouth when Pearl's soft voice turned icy. Ethan Cole, I'm reminding you for the last time, we are divorced. If you continue to say such things, you are slandering my name. For the sake of our past marriage, if you have any decency left, please watch what you say and control your actions. She finished with a cold, sharp look. Don't make me lose all respect for you. It was like a heavy blow to the head. Ethan's body trembled violently. Alistair's lips curved slightly. Mr. Cole, I assume you wouldn't want me to call security to have you removed? His words were a clear provocation. Ethan clenched his jaw, barely restraining himself from lashing out. He took one last, deep look at Pearl, his voice hoarse. Fine, you rest then. I'll come back to see you later. But as he turned, he heard Pearl say coldly, Don't. There's no need. Ethan's back stiffened. He turned to meet Pearl's gaze, which was utterly indifferent. Between us, it's goodbye forever. In the end, Ethan left, almost fleeing in disgrace. Back at his guest house, he sat on the edge of the bed, lost and dejected, his face a sickly pale green. On his way here, he had imagined many possibilities, but he had never imagined that Pearl could be so cold to him. It was a coldness that came from a deep, genuine indifference. Just as Pearl had said to her, he was just a part of the past. Before, he could deceive himself, telling himself she had fled out of a love that had turned to hate. But now, he was terrified. No matter how stubborn he was, he could no longer lie to himself. Pearl truly didn't love him anymore. She didn't want him. She had let go, leaving him behind. In an instant, an overwhelming wave of regret and pain crashed over him. He suddenly rushed into the bathroom and leaned over the sink, dry heaving. In the days since he had lost Pearl, he had barely eaten or drunk anything, and his stomach had started to give him trouble. When he learned she was still alive, his appetite had finally returned, but his digestive system was much weaker than before. In fact, his stomach had never been great due to his work. But with Pearl's care and cooking, it had improved significantly. She had loved him so much, couldn't bear to see him uncomfortable or overworked, so she had always quietly supported and cared for him. No matter how busy he was or how late he came home, there was always a hot meal waiting for him. If he showed even the slightest discomfort, Pearl would be more anxious than he was. But now, the Pearl who had eyes only for him was finally gone. He looked at his pathetic reflection in the mirror and managed a bitter smile. But what was he supposed to do? She had left him like this, with nothing but the wreckage of their memories. How was he supposed to face it all alone? In the hospital room, after Ethan Cole had left, Pearl Sterling was quiet for a long time. She hadn't actually expected him to find her. And she certainly hadn't expected him to have changed so much in such a short time. He used to be so handsome and immaculate, like the cool, noble moon in the sky, untouchable. But now, he seemed to have fallen from the clouds into the mud, thin and haggard. When she first saw him, she thought she was mistaken. It seemed his days had indeed been difficult. Thinking about him? Alistair Vance's voice pulled her back from her wandering thoughts. As she looked up, her gaze met a pair of deep eyes. She was slightly taken aback, noticing a swirl of complex emotions in them that she couldn't quite decipher. After a moment, she nodded, then shook her head. Just feeling a bit reflective. Alistair adjusted the blanket, pulling it up over her waist. His tone was light, but there was an unmistakable hint of probing. He's the ex-husband you mentioned. Now he's come looking for you, trying to win her back, Pearl said flatly. I suppose so. Alistair asked again, and what are your thoughts on that? Though he was prying into her private life, his voice was gentle, respectfully giving her an out. You can tell me if you want, but don't feel pressured if you don't. Pearl offered a small smile. My answer, didn't you already hear it just now? A flicker of light in Alistair's eyes, he restrained his emotions and simply said, Someone who let you down doesn't deserve a second chance. Pearl was a little surprised. How did you know he was the one who let me down? She had only told him that she was recently divorced, nothing more. To her, Ethan was just an ex-husband. The grievances of the past were no longer worth mentioning. Alistair said lightly, It's obvious. A woman as wonderful as you, to decide so resolutely to divorce him after a cancer diagnosis and come here for treatment all alone, it means he failed you and you've given up all hope, right? Pearl blinked. Yes, I gave up hope a long time ago. It just took a while to finally get here. After a brief silence, Alistair smiled. He was handsome and refined, a true gentleman, his eyes and brow filled with a gentle charm. It's not too late. You deserve someone better, someone who will truly cherish you. For some reason, those simple words, though not overly expressive, made Pearl's heart flutter. Her eyelashes trembled like a butterfly's wings as she lowered her gaze. After a long moment, she softly replied, For the next 2 weeks, Ethan Cole was like a man possessed, showing up every single day. He would time his visits for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, bringing food. Pearl refused him once, twice, but when she saw he wouldn't listen, she let him be. She wouldn't let him into her room, so he would stand outside, keeping vigil. To outsiders, he looked like the perfect, devoted man. Many of the nurses were moved by his handsome looks and unwavering dedication. Miss Sterling, with such an outstanding and handsome man pursuing you so devotedly, aren't you even a little bit tempted? Pearl had heard questions like this several times now. Each time, she would just manage a faint, polite smile, but the smile never reached her eyes. Pursuit, devotion, she was afraid she was unworthy of such things. As for being tempted, she had been tempted once before, and the result was a crushing defeat. She had no desire to repeat that mistake. Alistair Vance brought Pearl her meals every day. Sometimes he would cook himself and bring the food to the hospital to eat with her. Whenever he saw the man at the door, he would just give a cool smile and ignore him completely. One day, Alistair arrived as usual but was stopped by Ethan. "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" The hoarse accusation made Alistair pause. He turned his head. "On purpose about what?" Ethan's eyes were sharp and cold. "You're deliberately keeping Julie from seeing me, aren't you? You're deliberately stopping us from getting back together." As if he'd heard something absurd, Alistair scoffed. His gentle, handsome face was now etched with undisguised mockery. "What do you think Pearl is? A puppet on a string for you to control?" Like a bucket of cold water had been dumped over his head, Ethan's face instantly turned to ice. His lips moved, but before he could say anything, Alistair cut him off. "In your eyes, is Pearl just some thoughtless being who should be completely devoted to you, who should endure any harm you inflict without a single complaint, and follow you to the end of time, continuing to suffer your endless neglect?" "Ethan Cole, on what grounds? Who do you think you are?" Ethan's face was stiff. "That's not what I meant, isn't it? Because that's exactly what it sounds like to me." The sarcasm in Alistair's voice deepened. "Otherwise, why would you think that after you've hurt her so deeply, she would still want to be with you?" "Ethan Cole, Pearl is a person with feelings. She's a living, breathing human being. You were the one who ignored her, who lost her. And now you're blaming others. Don't you find that ridiculous?" A deep anger rose in Ethan's eyes. He wanted to argue, to demand what he knew. But as his mouth opened, he found he couldn't utter a single word. What could he possibly say to refute that? Alistair added a few more words lightly. "Instead of questioning others, you should take a good, long look at what you've done. You shattered her heart and still dream of things going back to how they were. Are you underestimating her, or are you overestimating yourself? A person who doesn't know how to cherish her doesn't deserve to have her. If I were you, and I had failed to love and cherish her in the past, I would be filled with remorse. But if she no longer wanted to see me, I would never pester her again. If you truly love her, if you want her to be happy, then that is the last thing you can do for her." In an instant, Ethan's face turned a mixture of pale and green. He clenched his jaw, the muscles in his cheeks tightening. "After all that, you're just telling me to get out of the way for you. I don't deserve her, so you think you do?" Faced with his accusation, Alistair Vance showed no signs of backing down. "Whether I deserve her or not, at the very least, I have more right to be standing here than you do." That stance completely infuriated Ethan Cole. His hands, hanging at his sides, clenched into tight fists, his knuckles turning white. "What makes you think Julie would choose you? Dream on the person Julie loves is me?" At this, Alistair actually laughed, a light, dismissive sound. It was filled with both mockery and indifference. "Even now, you're still deceiving yourself. I don't know whether to pity you or despise you. Pearl did love you, but that's in the past. You can't unspill water and you can't mend a broken mirror. Your marriage is shattered. No matter how much you refuse to admit it, that is the reality. As for whether Pearl will choose me, I don't know." Here, the smile vanished from his lips, his expression turning serious and composed. "I love her. I will do everything I can to win her over, to warm her heart, and to show her the sincerity of my feelings. If she is willing, I will love her forever until death do us part. But if she is not, that is her choice. It would only mean I am not fortunate enough to have someone as wonderful as her. I will respect her decision and love her silently from a distance where she cannot see." After speaking, Alistair went into the hospital room. He left Ethan standing outside the door, frozen and cold. Alistair's determined gaze and words echoed in his mind again and again. He suddenly felt an unprecedented sense of crisis and panic. What was he going to do? Someone was trying to take his Julie from him. If he couldn't keep her, what meaning would the rest of his life have? That night, he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. His mind replayed their past together, counting the few happy moments they had shared. These images, intertwined with Alistair's words, twisted in his mind until he felt he was going mad. As dawn broke and the sun rose, he suddenly shot out of bed. No, this couldn't happen. He could not lose his Julie. He changed his clothes and rushed to the hospital, hurrying to Pearl's room. This time, he didn't knock. He pushed the door open and walked right in, but what greeted him was an empty room. The blankets on the bed were neatly folded, and the entire room was spotless. It was as if no one had ever been there. In that moment, Ethan panicked. The sudden fear and despair of never seeing Pearl again seized his entire being. He stumbled out of the room and stopped a nurse. "Where's Julie?" "The person in this room, where is she?" The nurse said. "Oh, Miss Sterling, she's been discharged." "Discharged?" "Yes, her condition has improved a lot. She doesn't need to be hospitalized anymore." "Then where did she go?" "That I wouldn't know." Ethan stood there, stunned, and then felt himself on the verge of losing his mind. Pearl was discharged. She wasn't here anymore. She had once again disappeared from his world. How could this be? He had finally found her after so much trouble. How could she have the heart to abandon him again? Just then, the conversation of some passing interns caught his ear. "I'm so glad Mrs. Doc is finally discharged. It's been great seeing her get better every day." "Yeah, but the happiest person has to be the professor. He's the one who personally checked her out today. I heard he's even taking her on a date." "A date? Does that mean the professor is going to confess his feelings?" "Definitely. I saw him today. He was dressed up so formally, even more handsome than usual." Ethan spun around, his expression cold and sharp. He stopped them and demanded, where did Alistair Vance take her? Because he had been coming every day and was clearly close to Pearl, the interns recognized him. But for the sake of their professor's happiness, they certainly weren't going to tell him. "We don't know. Aren't you Pearl's ex-husband?" "You don't know? Well, you are her ex-husband. If Pearl didn't tell you, it means she doesn't want you to know. Why do you keep chasing after her?" By the time Ethan left the hospital, his face was a mask of utter despair. He was in an unfamiliar city, and it was so large. Where could he possibly find his Julie? He walked aimlessly through the streets, his eyes darting everywhere. He held on to a sliver of hope that he might run into her. If heaven had any pity for him, if it was willing to give him one more chance, it would surely let him find her again. Suddenly, a familiar figure entered his line of sight. His pupils widened, his eyes shining with an excited light. Heaven did have pity on him. He strode forward and grabbed the arm of the person about to enter a photo studio. "Julie," Pearl was startled. She turned her head to meet Ethan's intense gaze. "Julie, don't leave me again. I know I was wrong. Please don't disappear again. I'm so scared." Ethan, overcome with emotion, threw his arms around Pearl, holding her tight. Pearl was shocked and instinctively struggled. "Ethan Cole, let go of me." Of course, Ethan wouldn't let go. He held her even tighter. "No, I will never let you go again in this lifetime." However, the next second, with a thud, Ethan was knocked to the ground. Alistair Vance stood there, holding Pearl's wrist and shielding her behind him, his cold eyes fixed on the man on the floor. "Haven't you had enough? How many times does Pearl have to say it before you understand? You made a mistake, you feel remorse, and you want redemption. Why do you have to drag Pearl into it? What is Pearl to you? Have you ever once cared about her feelings?" As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a soft, small hand gently tugging at his sleeve. The next moment, Pearl stepped out from behind him. "It's okay. I can handle this." She looked up at Alistair and gave him a small smile. Then her gaze fell on Ethan, who was now standing up and wiping his mouth, her expression turning cold and distant. "Ethan Cole, you are as selfish as you've always been." This time, Ethan Cole shed all his pride and self-respect, indifferent to the stares of onlookers. His eyes were bloodshot, his face a canvas of humble pleading. "Julie, call me selfish, blame me, resent me, whatever makes you happy, I'll accept it. Can you just come back to me? You said it's all in the past, so let's not talk about the past. Let's start over, okay? This time, I will love you and cherish you properly. I will never let you be sad again, I swear. I truly love you. I can't live without you." Pearl listened to his words in silence, her expression unchanging from beginning to end. "Ethan Cole, we can't go back. Belated affection is cheaper than dirt. What was the point? You said you just want me to be happy. Well, let me tell you, I am very happy right now. Ever since I left you, I've been happy every single day. My life is full, my health is improving, and I have more friends. Every day brings something new and interesting that I enjoy. I've realized I was wrong all along. You have to love yourself before you can love someone else, and that's precisely what I forgot to do." Pearl's eyes were cool, her fair and beautiful face as calm as still water. She looked at Ethan as if he were a stranger. "What was between us is over. When I was at my lowest, looking back only brought pain. But thinking about it now, there are perhaps a few memories worth keeping. Go home. Don't come looking for me again." After 5 years of marriage, you at least know my personality. Don't make me discard even those last few memories." With that, she didn't look at Ethan again. She turned to Alistair with a smile and said, "Let's go inside." She had decided long ago that she would take a new photograph after being discharged. The first one, taken when she thought she was dying, would be a memorial to her past, a final period at the end of a chapter. And now she would take another, to commemorate her rebirth and the beginning of a new, beautiful life that was entirely her own. Ethan stared at her retreating back as a single tear fell. It was only in this moment that he clearly, truly understood that he had lost her completely. The way she looked at him held no love but no hate either. He should have known. That was just her way, fierce in love and decisive in leaving. She loved passionately, and when the love was gone, she let go without a second thought. He hadn't cherished her, and so he had lost her. And since that was the case, she wasn't going to wait around anymore. She had already walked too far away, and he would never be able to catch up to her in this lifetime. 6 months later, Pearl Sterling had her final checkup. "Miss Sterling, your health is excellent. You have nothing to worry about. Just continue to take good care of yourself." Pearl smiled. Stepping out of the hospital, she looked up at the brilliant sun, feeling a lightness she had never known before. Yes, she would take good care of herself, love herself well. Only then could she be worthy of being loved and be better at loving someone else. "Pearl," a gentle voice called out. She turned to see Alistair Vance striding down the steps. "Don't you have work today?" she asked. Alistair came to her side and naturally took her hand. "I took the day off to be with you. We can't let such a beautiful day go to waste. Come on, that restaurant you wanted to try last time, I got us a reservation, and that movie you wanted to see. I've already bought the tickets. For the entire day today, I am all yours." Pearl smiled and walked away with him, hand in hand. At that same time, Ethan Cole finished his night shift and returned to the familiar apartment. Looking at the photograph on his nightstand, he gently stroked its surface. "Julie, I'm home." He never appeared before Pearl Sterling again. Only when the longing became too much to bear would he travel to Bayside, to watch her from a distance where she could not see. Just as Alistair had said, though he could never win her back, he would guard their old home, guard their memories, and silently love her from a corner she would never see. And so, he would live out the rest of his days.